Rain pounded the windshield of Catherine Ashworth's battered Land Rover, turning the world outside into a blur of green and slate. She drove slowly along the narrow Cotswolds lane, knuckles white on the wheel, every thunderclap rattling her chest. In the back seat, Sophie sat silent, her wheelchair folded beside her, a thin blanket draped over her knees. Even the rain couldn't wash away the color in Sophie's pale cheeks. She hadn't smiled in months. Catherine swallowed hard and stole a glance at her daughter. Sophie's eyes were fixed on the fields slipping past, rolling hills dotted with sheep, ancient stone walls slick with water. Catherine had tried to cheer her up with stories of sunnier days, of Belle winning at Ascot, of the grand gatherings at Ashworth Manor. But since the accident, Sophie heard them as echoes from another life. Today, though, Catherine hoped a trip to the old horse fair might coax some warmth back into her daughter's heart. They turned off onto a muddy drive and climbed out. The air smelled of wet hay and earth, sharp with the promise of storm. Catherine helped Sophie into her wheelchair, careful as always, and guided her toward the heart of Stow Horse Fair, one of England's oldest and grandest gatherings of horses, traders, and spectators. Even in the rain, the fair teemed with life. Brightly painted gypsy caravans were parked in a crooked circle. Horse trailers rattled over puddles. Vendors in flat caps haggled with dealers in tweed jackets. The clatter of hooves competed with the cry of auctioneers, their voices cutting through the drizzle like razors. Catherine gripped Sophie's hand, the leather cold and damp. "Remember, darling," I said softly, "we're just here to look." Sophie's eyes, usually so guarded, flicked toward her mother. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I just want to see them, the horses." Catherine nodded, leading the way across straw-strewn ground. Each step crunching beneath their feet felt heavy, as if the world itself weighed against them. Unpaid bills folded in Catherine's pocket, the forfeited sale of their prized mares, the mortgage notice they couldn't ignore. Ashworth Manor, once their family's pride, was now a crumbling shell. They approached a ring of canvas, where the auctioneer stood atop a makeshift platform, face bright red under his cap. "Lot 32, the auctioneer boomed. "A wild one, mind you, ladies and gents. Probably fit only for the abattoir." From the shadows stepped a horse as black as midnight, every bone visible beneath the slick coat. He shook his head, water splattering like rain off a slate roof. His eyes were wide, panicked, an image of raw fear. The handler, a lean man in oilskins, reeled him in with a frayed rope. The horse snorted, nostrils flaring, hooves sinking into the mud. Sophie leaned forward, breath catching. "Mummy, look!" Catherine felt her heart twist. This frightened creature mirrored her daughter's own vulnerability, wild spirit trapped by circumstance. Sophie's small hand found Catherine's, squeezing tight. "Please," she said, "we can't let them send him away." Catherine drew a breath, glancing around. A sea of numbered paddles bobbed in the crowd. Among them, Marcus Whitmore's paddle hovered, a silent promise of cold certainty. Whitmore, the livestock magnate, known for buying up unwanted horses and shipping them out for slaughter. His polished shoes reflected the gray sky, his tailored suit as implacable as his reputation. The bidding began. Whitmore raised his paddle, 200 pounds. Another voice answered, 250. Whitmore's lips curved into a small smirk. 300! Catherine found herself calling out before she could think. Her voice trembled, but the words rang clear across the ring. A hush fell. Sophie gasped. The auctioneer's gavel hovered. 350! Whitmore countered, voice cool as the rain. Catherine's pulse slammed. The last of her savings, all 300 pounds, lay folded in her palm. Every sensible part of her screamed to walk away, to protect her daughter from further disappointment. Yet here, in Sophie's shining eyes, she saw hope glinting like a jewel. With a quick breath, she held up the paddle again, shouting, 300! The gavel dropped. Sold, to the lady in the green coat. A ripple of surprise washed the crowd. Catherine's legs trembled as she guided Sophie forward. The stable boy handed her the lead, eyes wide with sympathy and admiration. The black horse stamped, ears pricking, still trembling, but his gaze locked on Sophie. Sophie reached out, voice soft but eager. "Hello, boy. I'm Sophie." The horse backed away at first, but Sophie's calm tone seemed to reach him. Slowly, he took a hesitant step forward. Catherine pressed a biscuit from her pocket into the horse's waiting lips. He nibbled, whiskers brushing her fingers. Sophie smiled, an expression Catherine hadn't seen in months. "We'll take you home," she murmured.
Whitmore watched from the edge of the ring, dark eyes unreadable. Catherine felt the weight of his stare, but turned towards Sophie, letting the rain wash away her fears, if only for a moment. Loading the trailer was slow and tense. Storm, Catherine began to think of him by his new name, whinnied, hooves slipping on the slippery floor. Sophie called softly, urging him forward. Catherine pressed a soothing hand to his flank. At last, Storm stepped in. Catherine latched the gate and climbed into the driver's seat, Sophie rolling up beside her. The drive back was silent except for Storm's shuffling and the soft drip of the trailer's eaves. Sophie stared at him, tears in her eyes, not tears of grief, but of relief and wonder. "We did it," she whispered. Catherine reached out, brushing Sophie's hair back. "We did, sweetheart." Behind them, the fair receded into the gray distance. Ahead was Ashworth Manor, broken but still their home. And in the back, a wild black horse who, like Sophie, had been given one small chance to heal. For the first time in a long while, Catherine felt that chance pulsing between them, a fragile thread of hope guiding them through the storm. Thunder rumbled across the sky as Catherine guided the trailer into the makeshift unloading area at Stow Horse Fair. The rain had eased, but the ground was a quagmire of mud and straw. Sophie sat in her wheelchair just beyond the trailer, wrapped in her favorite tartan blanket, eyes bright with anticipation. Catherine unlatched the trailer door with a deep breath. Today, everything would change. A young stable hand stepped forward, flashlight in hand. He swung it into the trailer, revealing a lean, jet-black horse huddled in the corner, ribs showing, coat matted and trembling. Catherine's stomach clenched. She'd seen that wild look before, danger mixed with desperation. "Easy, boy," she murmured, voice gentle. Storm's nostrils flared. He shied, ear flicking. The stable hand whispered to him in a Cockney accent, trying to coax him out, but the horse only snorted and backed away. From behind, the auctioneer's voice rang out in brash Cockney. "Ladies and gents, here we have a right wild one, probably only fit for the slaughterhouse if no one steps up." The crowd around the ring murmured, some turning away, searching for easier bets. Catherine steadied Sophie's hand. "He deserves a chance," Sophie said, voice hushed but fierce. "Please, Mom, let's help him." Catherine's heart pounded. She'd risked everything, her last £300 to win that bid. Now she had to deliver. She glanced up and caught sight of Marcus Whitmore striding through the crowd. His posture relaxed, his dark suit immaculate even here in the mud. Whitmore's reputation preceded him. Livestock magnate, rumor, specialist in shipping problem horses to the continent for meat. His pale eyes met Catherine's, and he gave a slow nod, as if marking her as prey. The stable boy finally opened the ramp. Storm soared backward, his hooves clattering, rainwater flicking off his hooves like sparks. Catherine braced herself. "Sophie, stay back," she said, voice firm. Sophie nodded, but her eyes never left the horse. She understood, more than Catherine realized, that this meeting carried more weight than money. It was about faith, about giving voice to the voiceless. A gust of wind slammed against the canopy overhead, rattling its metal frame. The world seemed to hold its breath. Storm's hooves slid, flanks rippling, eyes wide. Catherine stepped forward, hand outstretched. "It's okay, boy," she said, tone calm, voice steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." The horse froze, muscles coiled like springs. For a moment, all Catherine felt was the pounding of her own heart. Then, with one cautious step, Storm lowered his head and sniffed the outstretched fingers. Sophie let out a soft gasp of relief. "Good boy," she whispered, voice a gentle caress. Storm edged down the ramp, hooves squelching in the mud. Catherine caught his halter and clipped it on, fingers trembling. As she let him out, rain began to fall again, fine droplets tracing rivers down Storm's sleek coat. He snorted, stamping a foreleg, and Catherine tightened her grip, determined not to let him slip away. At the same moment, Whitmore appeared at the edge of the ring, raising a numbered paddle. "150," he called, voice smooth as silk. The auctioneer's hammer hovered. From the crowd, another bidder chimed in. 200. Whitmore's paddle snapped up again. 250, he declared. Catherine's breath caught. Sophie leaned forward, eyes shining. "Don't let him win," she urged. Catherine swallowed, remembering the letter from the bank, the unpaid bills, the hush that fell over the manor each time someone asked about their debts. But she also remembered Sophie's laughter the first time Storm had nuzzled her hand. She couldn't step back now. 300, Catherine shouted, her voice louder than she'd expected.
A hush swept the ring. Whitmore's lip curled in mild surprise. He raised his paddle again. 400! Catherine shook her head, frustration flaring in her chest. "We can't!" Her voice faltered. Whitmore's eye gleamed. Sophie gripped Catherine's arm. "You can do it, Mom!" Catherine inhaled, mouth dry. Every logical part argued to stop, to save what little remained. But logic was powerless next to Sophie's hope. 350, Catherine called, voice firm. The air seemed to shimmer. Whitmore's paddle hovered, then dropped. 350? He echoed, tone mocking. "You've got spirit, Mrs. Ashworth, but not enough cash." Catherine's jaw tightened. She lifted her paddle higher. 350, she insisted, every fiber of her will in that cry. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Sophie's breath caught. Storm flicked his ears, sensing the tension. Then the gavel fell. "Sold, Mrs. Ashworth," the auctioneer announced. "You've saved him." A ripple of applause fluttered through the crowd. Some faces bright with admiration, others scanning Catherine as if she'd stepped into a new, unexpected role. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. He nodded once, acknowledging defeat, then turned and drifted back into the crowd, his umbrella tapping behind him like a slow metronome. Catherine exhaled, relief flooding her. She sank to one knee, gathering Sophie in her arms. "We did it," she whispered, voice thick. "We actually did it." Sophie's face split in a radiant smile for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "Storm," she murmured to the horse, who now stood quietly, head lowered. "You're safe now." The stable boy guided a strap under Storm's belly while Catherine and Sophie prepared to lead him away. Storm trembled but did not bolt. He took another biscuit from Sophie's hand, chewing slowly as rain continued its gentle drum. Catherine felt Sophie's small fingers slip into hers, warm and determined. "We'll fix him," she promised. "We'll fix everything." As they walked back toward the Land Rover, Storm trailing obediently, Catherine sensed the weight of Whitmore's stare no longer pressing on her back. She felt something new, purpose. Danger still lurked. Debts, Whitmore's likely reprisals, the grueling work ahead. But for now, in Sophie's laughter and in Storm's steady steps, there was hope bigger than any storm. Behind them, the fair went on. Distant calls of "next lot" and the scuffle of hooves in the mud. But for Catherine and Sophie Ashworth, the world had shifted. They had risked everything on a single moment of courage, and won. Rain turned to mist as they drove away, Storm sighing softly in the trailer. Sophie leaned forward, pressing her cheek against the glass. "Thank you, Mom," she said, voice soft but sure. Catherine smiled through tears. "Thank you, Storm, and thank you, Sophie." Together, they headed home. The first chapter of a new story unfolding with every mile. The morning sun slipped through ragged clouds, transforming the damp fields of Ashworth Manor into a soft tableau of greens and golds. Catherine stepped out onto the creaking porch, cradling a steaming mug of Earl Grey. The chill clung to her cheeks, but could not quench the fragile hope blossoming in her chest. Below, Sophie sat in her wheelchair at the edge of the stable yard, sketchbook in hand, her eyes bright with anticipation. Inside the old stables, Storm pressed his nose against the rough-hewn door, nostrils flaring at the scent of fresh hay and straw. Catherine set her mug on the railing and made her way down the mossy steps. Each footfall echoed in the silent dawn. The world felt hushed, as if holding its breath. Sophie wheeled herself forward, calling softly. "Morning, Storm," she said, voice warm. Storm flicked his ears and stamped a hoof, but his tense muscles already seemed to relax when he heard Sophie's gentle tone. Catherine knelt beside the stall door and ran her fingers along Storm's coat, marveling at the silky black sheen despite the mud caked on his legs. "He's doing better," Catherine whispered to Sophie. Sophie beamed. "He remembered my voice last night. He even let me touch his cheek." Catherine watched as Sophie reached out, trembling slightly, to stroke Storm's muzzle. The horse closed his eyes, exhaling a soft nicker. In that moment, Catherine felt her own tension melt. The stable, once a place of echoes and ghosts, now pulsed with life and promise. They spent the morning in a gentle routine. Catherine fetched a tin of digestive biscuits and a bucket of oats, while Sophie prepared Storm's feed. Catherine sprinkled fresh mint leaves, grown in the manor's long-neglected herb garden, and Sophie coaxed Storm's head toward the bowl. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, ears swiveling to catch every soft syllable Sophie uttered. When Storm finished, Catherine led him out into the small paddock behind the stables. The grass was slick with dew, and a faint mist clung to the ground. Sophie trailed in her wheelchair, her sketchbook forgotten as she watched Storm's movements. He sniffed the air, then began to trot in wide circles, nostrils flaring, mane rippling like a dark river. Catherine released the lead rope halfway around, and Storm paused, looking back at them with curious eyes. "Go on, girl," Sophie called, voice steady. "You're safe here." Storm took another hesitant step, then broke into a canter, the sound of hooves muffled on soft earth. Catherine covered her mouth to suppress a laugh, an impulse she hadn't felt in weeks. Sophie's face shone with a joy that rivaled any sunny afternoon. By noon, they had settled into a rhythm. Catherine taught Sophie how to curry Storm's coat, running the brush in long, soothing strokes. Sophie leaned forward, guiding Catherine's hand as if learning ancient rites. After, they sat on old tree stumps by the paddock, drinking tea from thermoses Catherine had filled before dawn. "Does it hurt, Mom?" Sophie asked, eyes on the horse as he rolled in the grass. "I don't think so," Catherine replied. "His leg still heals, but he seems comfortable." Sophie nodded, then closed her eyes and sighed. "I heard him breathe last night, like he was dreaming." Catherine wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "He's home, Sophie. He's safe." In the late afternoon, Catherine retreated to the manor house to tackle the ever-growing stack of bills. Sophie wheeled herself back to the stables, gathering fresh water and brushing Belle's silver coat, Belle having returned like a guardian spirit. Catherine found Sophie humming as she worked, an old lullaby passed down through generations of Ashworth women. When Catherine returned, Sophie looked up from the stall. "Look what I drew," she exclaimed, holding out her sketchbook. "That's Storm when he galloped." Catherine knelt to see. A vigorous charcoal sketch capturing the horse's wild grace, the wind whipping through his mane. Beneath it, in neat script, "Storm finds freedom." Catherine pressed her fingertips to the page, her eyes misting. "It's beautiful, darling." As evening fell, they lit lanterns in the stable's rafters, sending golden pools of light across the stalls. Catherine bandaged Storm's leg with gentle care, while Sophie rubbed soothing liniment into the wound. Belle stood calmly nearby, her soft muzzle nuzzling Sophie's shoulder as if offering comfort. Night settled over Ashworth Manor, wind whispering through ancient oaks. Inside the cozy kitchen, Catherine lit the hearth and set 2 mugs of hot chocolate on the table. Sophie joined her, sipping slowly, warmth spreading through her fingers. "Today was good," she said quietly. Catherine reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's forehead. "Tomorrow will be better." Sophie smiled, eyes heavy with contentment. "I think he trusts me now," she whispered, voice soft. Catherine's heart swelled. "You gave him that trust, Sophie." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant snort of Storm settling in his stall. For the first time since the fair, Catherine felt the weight of worry lift, replaced by a gentle hope that tomorrow, and the days beyond, might bring healing not only to Storm, but to them all. In the stillness of their small kitchen, amid the fading embers and the soft breathing of a daughter finally at peace, Catherine realized that the quiet days held their own power. In routine and ritual, in shared meals and whispered lullabies, they were knitting together the frayed edges of a broken family, one moment of kindness at a time. And as the first stars began to glimmer in the clear night sky, Storm's steady heartbeat in the next room echoed like a promise that even the wildest spirits can learn to trust, and that love's gentle persistence can shine through the darkest of storms. The morning mist wrapped Ashworth Manor in a silvery veil as Catherine made her way down the winding path toward the lavender thicket. A damp hush lay over the fields, broken only by the distant caw of a lone crow. In the stables, Storm and Belle's stalls stood side by side, yet Belle, the silver-white mare whose presence had felt like a whisper of another era, was nowhere to be seen. Catherine paused, heart tightening, and called softly, "Belle, are you here?" Sophie was already beside her, bundled in a woolen shawl, eyes bright with anticipation despite the cold. "I thought I heard her last night," she whispered, "like soft hoofbeats in the darkness." Catherine nodded, breath catching in her throat, as the memory of Belle's first appearance washed over her, the way the mare had materialized from the mist, head held high, coat glowing like moonlight. Together, they stepped into the lavender, each footfall releasing the faint scent of purple blooms.
Ahead, Belle's form emerged, stately and calm. Her mane rippled like liquid silver, dew clinging to her lashes. At the sight, Sophie gasped. "It's her!" she cried, voice trembling with excitement. "It's really her! Belle!" Storm, sensing the reunion, lifted his head and whinnied softly, hooves slipping on the damp earth as he hurried toward the mare. Belle lowered her head, nostrils flaring as she breathed in Storm's familiar scent. Then, in a gesture as graceful as a bow, she nudged his shoulder, as if offering comfort to the frightened colt she had never met. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes, tears for lost glory, for hardship endured, and for this impossible moment of reunion. She reached out, her hand hovering over Belle's neck, before she summoned the courage to touch the mare's flank. The white coat was cool and smooth beneath her fingers, a whisper of history alive in the present. "Welcome home, Belle," Catherine breathed. Sophie rolled forward, her wheelchair wheels crunching on twigs and dew-soaked grass. She pressed her cheek against Belle's soft side. "I missed you so much," she murmured. In that moment, the past unfurled in Catherine's mind like the flash of old photographs. She remembered Belle's youth, pliant and proud on the Ascot track, her silken coat catching the sun as cameras flashed. She recalled the roar of the crowd as Belle crossed the finish line, ribbons of purple and gold trailing from her bridle. But those memories, once so vibrant, had faded into sorrow when Belle had been sold, a casualty of the debts that threatened to swallow Ashworth's legacy. Now Belle stood before them, an emissary of grace and gratitude.
Sophie's laughter, light and joyous, cut through the dawn air like a chime. "She came back for us, Mom!" she exclaimed. Catherine let out a breath she hadn't known she held. She knelt beside Sophie, gathering her in an embrace. "Sometimes miracles happen," she whispered. "Sometimes love finds its way home." Over the next hour, they roamed the lavender fields together. Storm trotted close, Belle's calm presence anchoring him. Sophie offered them slices of apple, an echo of the racing stables past, while Catherine brushed Belle's mane, untangling dew-laden strands with gentle strokes. The mare's patient eyes followed every movement, as if approving this new chapter. Back in the stable yard, Catherine retrieved a faded leather-bound album from the tack room, a relic salvaged from the manor's library. By the lantern's glow, she turned the pages, revealing black and white photographs. Belle in her prime, Catherine in riding silks, and a young Sophie nestled against the mare's warm flank. Sophie traced the images with her fingertips. "Look, Mom, that was the day Belle won her first race," she said softly. Catherine smiled through tears. "That was the day our family believed anything was possible." They sat together on a bale of hay, flickering lantern light dancing on stone walls. Sophie read aloud the captions, voice steady, while Belle and Storm listened with rapt attention, their coats glimmering in the golden wash. Later, Sophie insisted on holding an impromptu victory tea by the stable door. She donned a flowery apron and arranged mismatched china teacups on a worn wooden table. Belle stood nearby, nostrils flared in curiosity, as Sophie poured tea and handed out homemade scones. "To second chances," Sophie declared, raising her cup. "To hope and to home." Belle nickered in approval, and Storm responded with a soft whinny, the two horses standing sentinel as if guardians of Ashworth's rebirth. Catherine joined in the toast, hands clasped around her cup. "To us," she added, voice rich with meaning. Word of Belle's return spread quickly through the village. By midday, neighbors drifted down the lane, drawn by the extraordinary sight of two mares, one black, one silver-white, grazing peacefully beneath the sunlight. Mrs. Jarvis, the baker, arrived with a basket of freshly baked scones, eyes shining. "Well, I'll be," she exclaimed, "if that isn't a miracle in full bloom." The Women's Institute soon organized a celebratory gathering, tables dressed with lace cloths, teapots gleaming, and bouquets of lavender as centerpieces. Sophie presided as hostess, offering tea to visitors with a confidence that belied her months of sadness. In the hushed glow of late afternoon, Catherine found herself standing beside Belle once more. She closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to the mare's neck, feeling the rhythmic thrum of Belle's heart beneath. "You've always belonged here," she whispered. "Ashworth Manor missed you." Belle nickered softly, vibration pulsing through Catherine's arm. In that radiant moment, Catherine knew the true power of legacy, how love passed down through generations could resurrect hope even amid ruin. As dusk settled and lanterns were lit, casting warm pools of light, Sophie led Storm and Belle side by side in a gentle walk around a yard. Their synchronized steps felt like a dance of past and present, sorrow transmuted into promise. Catherine lingered in the doorway, watching mother and son, Belle and Storm, moving together beneath the twilight sky. She felt an unshakable certainty that no storm, no debt, no threat from Marcus Whitmore could ever dim the light rekindled today. For Belle's return was more than a reunion. It was the spark that ignited a sanctuary of healing, resilience, and unwavering faith. And as the cool night air wrapped around Ashworth Manor, Catherine whispered a vow into the quiet. "We will honor you, Belle, with every breath, with every new dawn." And in the stillness, Belle's soft nicker answered, a promise that at Ashworth Manor, true miracles were born from the courage to believe. The sun rose cold and gray over Ashworth Manor, casting long shadows across the dew-drenched lawn. Catherine carried Sophie's breakfast tray out to the porch, her hands shaking with fatigue. Every night she had lain awake, listening for the slightest sound of trouble. Storm and Belle grazed quietly in the paddock, their heads bowed as if sensing the weight that pressed on the estate. Catherine set down the tray, and Sophie wheeled herself to her favorite spot beside her mother. "I can't shake the feeling that something's coming," Sophie murmured, her voice soft but urgent. Catherine traced a finger around the rim of Sophie's teacup, taking a slow sip of tea. "We'll face it together, sweetheart," she replied, voice steady but low. No sooner had she spoken than the phone rang. Catherine's heart leapt in her chest as she answered. "Mrs. Ashworth, Marcus Whitmore here," he said, voice smooth as polished marble. "I hope I'm not interrupting your peaceful morning." Catherine pressed her free hand to the porch railing. "I'm busy, Mr. Whitmore," she replied, tone cool. "Ah, but business is never far from my mind," he said, amusement threading his words. "I wanted to remind you that horses are not charity cases. Some animals belong on a plate, not a pedestal." A wave of anger flushed Catherine's cheeks. "You'll find no plates here, Whitmore," she shot back, voice sharp. "Charming," he chuckled. "But I trust you understand supply and demand. If you ever tire of feeding patchwork ponies, I'd be happy to relieve you of your burden, for a price." He hung up before Catherine could respond. She dropped the phone, heart hammering, anger and fear warring in her chest. Sophie reached for her mother's hand. "Don't let him scare you," Sophie whispered. "I won't, darling," Catherine promised, though doubt lingered in her mind. The next morning, Catherine discovered the first act of sabotage. A wide tear in the perimeter fence, wires cut with surgical precision, the gap large enough for a horse to slip through. She found Storm and Belle unharmed, but the sense of violation made her blood run cold. She swept the torn fence wire into a pile and returned to the manor house, mind racing with questions. Who did this, and why? Within days, the feed supplier called with a forced apology. "I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Ashworth," they said, voice hesitant, "but we've been instructed to suspend deliveries indefinitely." "Instructed by whom?" Catherine demanded. I can't say, ma'am. I'm just following orders." The line went dead. Catherine stared at the receiver, furious. Without feed, the horses would suffer. Without supplies, the sanctuary would collapse. She rang every alternative supplier within 50 miles. No one would sell to her. One farmer even hung up, saying she'd stirred up too much trouble. That evening, 2 men in white coats appeared at the stables, clipboards in hand. They introduced themselves as inspectors from the Animal Health Authority. "We've received reports of neglect," they said. "We need to examine all your records and facilities." Catherine stepped forward, shoulders squared. "You're welcome to look," she said, "but you'll find everything in perfect order." The inspectors moved through the stable with practiced eyes, noses wrinkling at the scent of straw and horse. They took notes, snapped photographs, and asked questions in clipped tones. When they left, one muttered, "Best keep a closer eye on things." Word spread fast. By morning, rumors buzzed through the village. "Ashworth's horses are sickly. Mrs. Ashworth can't handle the sanctuary. Something's not right at the manor." Even Mrs. Jarvis, the baker who had once delivered scones out of loyalty, hesitated at the door. Catherine felt the walls closing in. Each threat chipped away at her resolve. Fences cut, suppliers silenced, inspections looming, rumors poisoning the well. But Sophie refused to let despair win. She gathered every scrap of courage and stood beside her mother. "We can't let him push us out," she said, voice firm. Catherine nodded, determination flaring in her eyes. "We'll fight this, Sophie. We have to." That afternoon, as the storm clouds gathered once more, Sophie wheeled herself to the paddock. She watched Storm and Belle grazing side by side, manes tangled in wildflowers. She called to them, her voice clear and strong. "Hey, Storm, Belle, we've got to stick together, okay?" Storm lifted his head, nostrils flaring, and trotted over. Belle followed, hooves soft on the grass. Sophie reached out, touching their coats with resolute fingers. In that moment, Catherine realized the sanctuary meant more than just shelter. It was a bond, unbreakable. Just as the skies opened and rain began to patter, Catherine saw a sleek black car roll up the manor drive. The engine idled. The car door opened. Marcus Whitmore stepped out, umbrella in hand, his expensive shoes unblemished by the mud. Catherine squared her shoulders and guided Sophie toward the porch, refusing to show fear. Whitmore approached, umbrella tapping, his dark eyes cold. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said, voice polite but edged with menace. "I trust you understand I've been more than patient." "You've been nothing but trouble," she replied, voice steady. Whitmore smiled, a slow, predatory smile. "A shame. We could have been such good neighbors. Yet here we are, fences shredded, suppliers refusing, inspections triggered by anonymous tips. How unfortunate." "What kind of neighbor are you?" Catherine asked, anger flaring. Whitmore shrugged. "The kind who ups the ante when someone overextends herself. You see, I have certain interests in clean pastures and healthy herds. Your little sanctuary is a distraction." Sophie wheeled herself forward, courage blazing in her eyes. "You can't scare us away, Whitmore," she exclaimed. "We've built this place with our hearts." Whitmore's smile faltered for a split second, then returned. "Admirable spirit, child," he said, "but spirit doesn't pay the vet bills or mend the fences. I'll give you one more chance. Sell me Storm, and I'll drop my concerns. Keep him, and I'll see to it the sanctuary collapses." He opened his umbrella with a flick, blocking the falling rain, then stepped back into his car. The engine roared, and he drove away, the spray of the wheels marking his departure like a punctuation mark of threat. Catherine stood in the rain, Sophie's hand in hers, the sanctuary and its future hanging in the balance. But as they watched Whitmore's taillights vanish down the drive, Catherine felt a spark of defiance. "He wants a fight," she said, voice fierce. "Well, he's got one." Sophie smiled, water streaming down her cheeks. "Together, Mom, we can win this." Belle and Storm stood close by, their eyes calm and steady. In their stillness, Catherine found strength. The wind whipped around them, carrying away doubt, leaving clarity behind. Ashworth Manor had faced worse storms, and with Sophie by her side and the community history behind them, Catherine knew that no matter what Marcus Whitmore set in motion, they would stand firm. Fences mended, feeds secured, inspections passed, rumors silenced. Because this sanctuary was more than land. It was hope. And hope, Catherine realized, was the one thing no enemy could destroy. The sky over Ashworth Manor darkened with alarming speed, as if a giant hand had drawn a curtain of slate across the horizon. Catherine stood at the kitchen window, watching wind-tossed branches whip against the manor's ancient stone walls. The forecast had promised a mild spring shower, but the first rumble of thunder rolled in low and menacing, growing louder by the second. Sophie, bundled in layers beside her, pressed a hand to the glass. "It's coming in fast, Mom," she said, voice edged with worry. Catherine nodded, heart tightening. She slipped her arm around Sophie's shoulders. "Let's make sure the horses are safe before it really breaks," she replied. They moved quickly through the house, grabbing flashlights and wellies. Catherine's mind raced through a checklist. Stall doors latched, water buckets filled, blankets secured. Sophie wheeled herself to the stable door, flashlight beam dancing over the wet cobbles. The scent of hay lay heavy in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of coming rain. Storm and Belle stood side by side in their stalls, ears pricked against the growing roar of wind. Storm's flank heaved with unease. Belle remained calm, her silver coat slick with condensation. Catherine knelt at the stall door, voice soothing. "It's just thunder, sweetheart," she said. "You're safe here." Storm snorted, nostrils flaring, and pawed the ground. The first fat drops of rain splattered the roof. Sophie reached out, offering a reassuring pat. "You've been through worse, boy," she murmured. "We've got you."
Lightning split the sky, brilliant as day, and the stable shuddered with the thunderclap that followed. Storm whirled, eyes wide, hooves slipping on straw. In a heartbeat, he backed toward the metal feed trough at the back of the stall, panic propelling him faster than any logic. Catherine's heart lurched. "Storm, stop!" she shouted, voice cracking. But the horse bolted, crashing through the stall door as if it were paper. Wood splintered, straw exploded in clouds, and Storm charged into the dim corridor. Catherine grabbed Sophie's arm. "Hold on!" she cried. Belle whinnied, stamping her hoof as she pressed against her stall door. Catherine yanked her daughter back from the path of the rampaging horse. Sophie's breath caught, eyes wide with fear. Storm thundered down the aisle, body taut, eyes wild. He veered toward the far end of the stable, where old equipment lay stacked. Iron bars, broken pitchforks, discarded wheels. The remnants of past repairs and past neglect. Catherine followed, flashlight beam bouncing off rusty metal. "Oh no," she whispered. Storm, still panicked by the thunder, slashed out and collided with a long, jagged iron bar propped against the wall. A sickening crack filled the air. Storm reared, then pitched forward, leg twisting unnaturally. He collapsed to his knees, blood welling where the bar had ripped through flesh and tendon. Sophie gasped, voice trembling. "Mom, oh my God!" Catherine sprinted forward, adrenaline numbing the cold. She dropped to her knees beside Storm, flashlight clenched between her teeth, hands slick with rain and blood. The horse thrashed, every muscle trembling with pain and terror. "Easy, Storm, easy," she whispered, pressing her hands to his wound, trying to stop the flow of red with her jacket. "It's okay, sweetheart, it's okay." Sophie wheeled beside them, tears running down her cheeks, but her voice remained firm. "You're going to be all right, I promise." Meanwhile, Belle pounded on her stall door, stamping back and forth, letting out distressed nicker after nicker. Catherine leaned into Storm's face, voice urgent. "Look at me, boy, look at me. You have to stay with us." The rain hammered the stable roof, thunder shook the rafters, and the wind howled through gaps in the stone. Catherine wrapped her scarf around Storm's shuddering leg, but the wound was deep, tendon exposed, blood pooling in the straw. She ripped strips from her coat sleeves to apply pressure, heart pounding so fiercely she thought the shock would overtake her. Sophie reached into her pocket and pulled out the small music box Catherine had given her, an old English lullaby. She opened it, soft notes warbling through the chaos. Then, voice wavering but determined, she began to sing. "Hush now, love, the night is long. Softly rest your weary head. Though the storm may rage and throng, hope's bright light will guide ahead." The melody wavered around the cries of thunder, but Storm's thrashing slowed. His breathing came in ragged gulps, ears twisting toward Sophie's gentle song. Catherine let out a shaky breath, pressing harder on the tourniquet of cloth. A high-pitched whine pierced the storm, a siren in the distance. The local veterinarian, summoned by Catherine's frantic call earlier, had answered before dawn. Now headlights cut through the mist, tire skidding to a halt in the muddy courtyard. The vet burst through the stable door, medical kit in hand, coat soaked but eyes sharp. "What have we here?" he called, voice steady. "Keep pressure on that leg, Miss Ashworth." Catherine slid away enough to let him in. The vet knelt beside Storm, inspecting the injury by flashlight and lantern. He worked with precision, cleaning the wound, applying antiseptic swabs, probing gently for bone fragments. Storm flinched and whinnied, but Sophie's song continued, her small hand stroking Storm's mane. "He's a tough one," the vet said, between clipped instructions. Tendon laceration, possible fracture. I need to stabilize that leg before we can move him. He applied a splint fashioned from wooden boards and bandages from his kit. Catherine held Storm's head, whispering encouragement. Belle nosed the edge of the stall door, eyes shining, as if lending her silent strength. The vet worked quickly, wrapping the splint with gauze, securing it snug but not too tight. He then injected pain relief and antibiotics, muttering under his breath about infection risks. Sophie wiped her tears and offered Storm a piece of apple. "For being brave," she said softly. Storm nuzzled her hand, chewing slowly. The vet straightened, wiping his brow. "He'll need stall rest for weeks, maybe months, and careful rehab, but he'll live." Catherine exhaled, relief flooding through her like warmth after cold. Thank you so much," she said, voice catching.
The vet packed up, giving Catherine precise instructions on cleaning, rebandaging, and monitoring for fever or swelling. He patted Storm gently, then squeezed Catherine's shoulder. "You did well, lass. He's lucky to have you." Outside, the storm broke into a final downpour, thunder receding like a departing army. Belle's knicker softened to a gentle exhale. Sophie closed the music box, eyes shining. "He's going to be okay," she whispered. Catherine scooped her daughter into a hug, pressing her face against Sophie's damp hair. "Yes, he is," she said, voice thick with gratitude. "We're going to nurse him back together." As the rain eased and gray light dawned over Ashworth Manor, Catherine felt hope and fear entwined. Fear for the long road of recovery ahead, hope in the bond that had seen them through the worst of the storm. Belle stood guard, Storm rested on his splinted leg, and Sophie's lullabies lingered in the stable like a promise. In that fragile morning light, Catherine knew that this accident, as horrific as it had been, would not break them. Instead, it would forge their resolve into something stronger. Proof that even amidst the fiercest storm, love and courage could bring relief and renewal. Word of Storm's accident traveled faster than dawn's first light, carried on the whisper of winds through the hedgerows and the chatter that wove itself along the village lanes. By midday, the once quiet drive to Ashworth Manor was alive with headlights and engines, an impromptu convoy winding down the lane in solidarity. Catherine stood at the edge of the paddock, heart pounding, as men and women poured from battered pickups and farm trucks, arms full of hay, feed sacks, and building materials. Their faces were streaked with mud and marked by lines of worry, yet their eyes glinted with determination. Sophie, bundled in blankets atop her wheelchair, watched in awe as the first load of fresh straw bales was carried into the stable by a stout farmer named Mr. Dixon. He set them down gently, then turned and offered Catherine a weary but warm smile. "Thought you could use a hand," he said, voice low and steady. Catherine clasped his rough, calloused hand, gratitude and emotion warring in her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Dixon. I don't know what to say." "No need for words, Mrs. Ashworth," he replied. "We're neighbors. We look after our own." Across the courtyard, a group of women from the local Women's Institute bustled toward the kitchen door, arms laden with homemade stew, crusty loaves of bread, and jars of raspberry jam. Mrs. Phillips, their matronly leader with silver curls and an apron dotted in flour, approached Sophie first. "We heard about your brave work with Storm, dear," she said, offering Sophie a thermos of hot soup. "You'll need your strength for what lies ahead." Sophie smiled, wrapping small fingers around the warm mug. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Phillips." The women set long tables under a white canopy, laying out plates, cutlery, and gingham tablecloths. Laughter mingled with the clatter of pots, a comforting overture to the afternoon's work. Nearby, teenage veterinary students arrived in white coats, their notebooks tucked under arms and fresh boots squeaking on the damp grass. "We're here to learn and to help," one of them said, voice bright with purpose.
Where do you need us first?" Catherine directed them to the stable, where Storm lay on fresh straw, legs splinted and bandaged. The students clustered around, eager to assist the old vet who arrived soon after, his Scottish brogue rolling over them like a gentle wave. "Aye, you lot did well to get this far," he said, inspecting Storm's leg. "Now we'll make sure he stays comfortable and heals strong." They worked in concert. One student tidied the stall, another refilled feed buckets, while others administered fresh bandages under the vet's watchful eye. Storm's breathing slowed as the flurry of care soothed his tense nerves. Meanwhile, retired cavalry officers, stooped but proud, arrived in tweed jackets, their polished boots still holding echoes of bygone parades. They carried leather saddles, brushes, and saddle soap, insisting on giving Storm and Belle a proper grooming. "A horse is only as noble as his care," Colonel Llewellyn declared, clipping a newly polished bridle onto a hook. "Let's see the shine on those coats." The officers scrubbed and brushed, murmuring horse lore and past triumphs. Storm seemed to relax, leaning into the colonel's steady hand. Belle, older and wise, closed her eyes with contentment, as if recognizing the respect offered. By late afternoon, the spirit of the barn raising was in full swing. Neighbors hoisted timber to mend broken fences, hammered nails in newfound unity, and patched the shattered gate that had once allowed the accident to occur. Children ran between adults, carrying hammer and nails with clumsy enthusiasm, while others gathered fallen twigs for the fire.
Sophie watched from the threshold, her eyes bright with pride. She wheeled herself forward, voice clear. "Thanks, everyone. Your help means everything." The assembled crowd cheered, rallying around Sophie like she was the heart of the effort. Catherine felt tears prickle at her eyes. This was the community she had feared lost, now reassembled brick by brick, hoof by hoof. As dusk settled, lanterns and string lights were strung along the barn's rafters, casting a warm glow over the freshly repaired stalls. The smell of wood smoke and stew drifted together, creating a heady perfume of home and hope. Everyone gathered for a simple supper. Steaming bowls of stew ladled by the Women's Institute, thick slices of bread slathered with butter, and stoneware mugs filled with cider. Colonel Llewellyn tapped his spoon on a plate, calling for silence. "To Ashworth Manor's finest guardian, Sophie Ashworth," he declared, voice ringing. "May your courage be as steadfast as these walls you've helped rebuild." The villagers, farmers, students, and officers raised their mugs, a cacophony of cheer echoing into the night. Sophie beamed, covering her face in delighted shock. "Thank you, everyone," she said, voice warm. "We did this together." In the stillness that followed, Catherine slipped away to check on Storm. He lay quietly in his stall, ear-flicking as the distant laughter washed over him. Belle stood guard outside, head lowered, as if in silent vigil. Catherine knelt and ran her hand down Storm's neck. "You see, boy, he's not alone," she whispered. "We all stand with you." Storm nickered softly, turning his head to press his muzzle against Catherine's shoulder. Returning to the gathering, Catherine found Sophie surrounded by new friends. A vet student showing off her sketch of Storm's kinked leg, Mrs. Phillips tucking a napkin into her shawl, and Mr. Dixon teaching a group of children how to identify wildflowers for the sanctuary's healing garden. Catherine took a deep breath, letting the warmth of shared purpose fill her. The fresh straw beneath her boots, the scent of lavender in the air, and the soft glow of lanterns all wove together into a tapestry of renewal. She realized that the sanctuary, once a solitary mission, had blossomed into a beacon of unity. Late that evening, when the last of the lanterns were extinguished and the villagers drifted away under a canopy of stars, Catherine and Sophie lingered by the paddock gate. Storm and Belle stood side by side, silhouettes against the faint glow of the manor house. "Look at them," Sophie said softly. "They're at peace." Sophie nodded, eyes shining with tears of joy. "So are we, Mom. So are we." Catherine wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, breathing in the sweet, cool air. The night was still, but the echoes of the day's laughter and labor lingered like a promise. "This is the beginning," Sophie whispered, "not the end." "Yes," she replied, "a new beginning." And beneath the watchful stars, Ashworth Manor and its horses stood ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Together, as a community reborn. Spring at Ashworth Manor heralded more than new blooms. It marked the birth of the Ashworth Manor Horse Sanctuary. Under Catherine's determined leadership, the crumbling stables transformed into bright, airy barns with fresh straw, solar-heated water troughs, and soft rubber matting in every stall. Volunteers meticulously painted fences in warm cream and sage green, echoing the manor's faded elegance. Belle and Storm, once symbols of past hardship, now stood at the heart of this bustling refuge. Catherine walked the paddocks each morning, clipboard in hand, as Sophie cheerfully greeted every newcomer, her voice brimming with the confidence forged by months of shared triumphs and trials. One of the sanctuary's earliest programs was pony therapy for disabled children from London. Every Wednesday, a bright yellow coach rolled down the manor's gravel drive, discharging wide-eyed youngsters clutching blankets and teddy bears. Sophie, now the sanctuary's official ambassador, led the sessions with gentle authority. She introduced each child to Storm, explaining how his steady gaits could soothe anxiety and build strength. Parents watched in awe as children, many of whom had never felt a horse's warmth beneath them, tentatively settled into saddleless bareback pads. Soft squeals of delight echoed through the paddock, as Storm ambled in slow circles, the children's nervous laughter blossoming into joyful whoops. Catherine stood at the fence, eyes bright, knowing that these moments of healing fulfilled her deepest purpose.
Meanwhile, local schools began bringing classes to the manor on lesson field trips. Under a canopy of oaks, children hunched over sketch pads, illustrating the evolution of British horse breeds, while Catherine and volunteers recounted stories of medieval war mares and Victorian carriage horses. In the restored carriage house, an interactive exhibit displayed antique tack, racing silks, and photographs of Belle's ascot glory. For many pupils, these trips were their first encounter with agricultural history outside textbooks. They learned to groom ponies, distinguish hoof shapes, and even tack up for short rides. By the end of each day, students left with questions firing their imaginations, and Catherine found joy in nurturing a new generation's respect for equine heritage. The sanctuary's reputation for excellence soon attracted collaboration with the Royal Agricultural University. Graduate students and professors arrived to set up research stations in the old hayloft, studying equine nutrition, rehabilitative exercise protocols, and sustainable stable design. Storm and a select group of rescue horses served as conducted subjects in carefully supervised trials, from specialized diets for tendon recovery to low-impact exercise regimens on soft sand tracks. Catherine met weekly with the research team, discussing findings over tea in the manor's drawing room. Their work not only improved care for the sanctuary's own residents, but contributed to best practice guidelines adopted by similar centers nationwide, a testament to the sanctuary's ambition to lead, not merely to shelter. Fundraising became a highlight of the calendar, ushering supporters from across the county to elegant charity horse shows and afternoon tea parties. On show days, white canvas tents sprouted along the main lawn, tables dressed in lace cloths and porcelain teacups. Riders demonstrated dressage patterns and jumping courses, while local artisans displayed handcrafted tack and equestrian art. Inside the marquee, crowds sipped elderflower lemonade and sampled Victoria sponge, bidding on auctions that offered behind-the-scenes tours and personalized riding lessons with Sophie. Each sunset closed with a crescendo of applause and the clink of champagne flutes, the twinkling lanterns overhead reflecting the enduring magic of community spirit harnessed for goodwill. Through it all, Storm became the sanctuary's star ambassador, His sleek black coat gleamed under the sun as he led gentle trail rides for anxious veterans seeking solace. Children once bound to wheelchairs found mobility and confidence astride his steady back. Sophie, wheelchair-mounted, guided tours with encyclopedic knowledge and warm enthusiasm, her voice carrying across paddocks filled with curious onlookers. Catherine observed her daughter's growth with a swell of pride. Sophie's laughter, once silent and rare, now rang clear as silver bells, touching every corner of the estate. Meanwhile, Marcus Whitmore's once unassailable reputation collapsed under the weight of the community's loyalty to the sanctuary. His livestock company found itself boycotted by local suppliers, shunned by friends who once toasted his success. When he arrived unannounced one afternoon, hoping to intimidate Catherine into selling Storm, he was met instead with cold stares and boarded-up gates. Even the village pub refused service to his chauffeur. Defeated, Whitmore withdrew his interests from the region, a faded figure slipping away from the very land he once sought to control. At the height of the sanctuary's success, an official delegation arrived bearing a gilded certificate and the Queen's Award for voluntary service. The manor's courtyard brimmed with volunteers, children, researchers, and neighbors as Catherine and Sophie received the medal in an emotional ceremony. Flashbulbs popped, cameras from local papers recorded the moment, and Sophie whispered to her mother, "We did it, Mom." Catherine's voice trembled with gratitude as she replied, "We did this together." The award marked not an end, but a milestone, proof that resilience, compassion, and shared effort could transform despair into flourishing life. That evening, as lanterns glowed across the paddocks and rescued horses roamed contentedly, Catherine and Sophie stood on the porch, hands entwined. "Look at what we've built, Mom," Sophie said softly. Catherine nodded, gazing at the sanctuary's happy bustle. "This is real wealth, Sophie. It's in every heartbeat of these horses and every smile we've seen." Under the vast starlit sky, Ashworth Manor Horse Sanctuary pulsed with promise and purpose, an enduring legacy born from one family's choice to answer the call of kindness, proving that sometimes the smallest yes can reshape an entire community. Autumn descended on Ashworth Manor like a soft exhalation, painting the rolling fields in hues of amber and gold. A gentle chill drifted through the trees, scattering leaves in swirling spirals across the damp grass. Belle, now well into her twilight years, moved with a slow dignity, her silver-white coat dappled with age spots and her gait unsteady beneath her weight. For months, she'd stood sentinel alongside Storm, guiding the younger horse with the quiet assurance only a lifetime of experience could bring. But lately, Belle's breaths had grown shallow, and her head drooped low, as if carrying the sorrow of 100 distant races. On a crisp October morning, Catherine found Sophie beside Belle's stall, brushing the mare's mane with trembling fingers. Sophie's own cheeks were stained with tears, her wheelchair pulled close so she could lean forward, pressing her cheek to Belle's soft neck. "I'll never forget you, Belle," Sophie whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for bringing hope back to us." Outside, Storm stood guard, nostrils quivering, as he watched Belle's slow movements. Catherine carried a wicker basket filled with fresh apples, handfuls of sweetgrass hay, and a blanket embroidered with Belle's name and the date of her first victory at Ascot. She knelt beside Sophie. "Today's going to be hard, but it's right," Catherine said gently. "Belle gave us so much. Let's give her this moment." Sophie nodded solemnly. Belle seemed to understand. She nickered softly, lowering her head so Catherine could slip the blanket over her broad back and drape the basket beside her. The pull of autumn sunlight through the stable window cast a warm glow, as if the world itself honored Belle's quiet grace. In the hours that followed, a steady stream of volunteers, neighbors, and sanctuary friends came to pay their respects. Mrs. Phillips from the Women's Institute brought a wreath of lavender and rosemary, symbols of remembrance and love. The retired cavalry officers placed a polished brass nameplate on the stall door, engraved simply, Belle, 2005-2025, our guardian angel. Children from earlier pony therapy sessions pressed small drawings into Catherine's hand, crayon sketches of Belle's proud form, hearts and flowers dancing around her. As the sun dipped low, Catherine, Sophie, and the old vet led Belle to the ancient oak in the paddock, the very tree beneath which Belle had first appeared that mist-shrouded morning. The oak's sprawling branches formed a natural cathedral, its roots threaded deep into the Cotswold soil. There, in the hush of twilight, Belle was laid to rest with full honors. Soft blankets beneath her, a circle of flowers ringed around, and the echo of gentle voices in the cool air. Sophie knelt, brushing leaves from Belle's flank. Her tears fell freely. "Goodbye, Belle," she murmured. "You taught me to believe again." Catherine knelt beside her daughter, her own tears shining on her cheeks. "Belle's spirit will always guide us," she whispered. "She built something here that endures." Then, as the last light faded, Catherine stood and addressed the gathered circle. "Friends, today we say farewell to Belle. She was more than a companion. She was our teacher and protector. In her we saw loyalty, strength, and the grace to rise above hardship. Let her memory remind us that love and the choices we make live far longer than any one life." A hush settled over the paddock, broken only by the soft rustle of oak leaves. Storm pawed gently near the grave, nuzzling the earth as if to anchor Belle's spirit to the land she had loved. Catherine and Sophie exchanged a glance, a deep understanding passing between them. Belle's journey had ended, but her legacy would guide them onward. That evening, as Catherine tucked Sophie into bed, the glow of the lantern casting long shadows on the walls, they spoke quietly of the lessons Belle had taught. "About defeat and victory," Catherine began, voice soft. "Belle showed us that losing everything isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new chapter if we choose to write it." Sophie nodded, eyes heavy but bright. "She taught me to find strength in the darkest moments," Sophie said. "When storm bolted, and when I felt I had nothing left, that's when she came back, and we built something new." Catherine kissed her daughter's forehead. "About legacy and responsibility," she continued, "Belle reminded us that true nobility isn't in titles or land. It's in how we use our gifts to help others. That's how we honor her." Sophie closed her eyes, the soft rise and fall of her breath echoing the lullabies they had sung to Storm during his healing. The next morning, Catherine walked the paddock alone, the air crisp and alive with promise. The oak's branches spread wide, and where Belle had rested, a small rowan sapling, planted by Sophie, stood rooted in fresh soil. Around it, volunteers had arranged flowers and left handwritten notes, each a testament to Belle's impact. Catherine knelt and placed her hand on the sapling's trunk. "You'll grow tall and strong, just like she did," she whispered. "This is your legacy." By midday, the sanctuary buzzed with renewed energy. Storm moved freely. His injured leg healed enough for gentle exercise. Sophie led a group of children in brushing the rescued ponies, laughter floating through the air. Volunteers rebuilt the corral where Belle once stood, the new boards polished and sturdy. In the restored carriage house, Catherine and a local historian unveiled a tribute display. Belle's racing silks, ribbons, and photographs, alongside a written chronicle of her life and influence. As the plaque was unveiled, Catherine addressed a crowd of supporters. "Belle's passing reminds us that every life shapes the world around it. Our sanctuary exists because of the love she inspired. Let us carry forward her lessons of resilience, compassion, and community, and build something even greater in her honor." Applause rose like a wave, echoing off the old stone walls. Catherine looked out at the faces of friends and neighbors, farmers, students, officers, children, and felt a surge of pride. The sanctuary was no longer a fragile hope, but a flourishing reality. That evening,
Catherine and Sophie sat on the porch steps, the horizon aflame with autumn's glow. Relief, sadness, and hope mingled in their hearts, forming a tapestry of gratitude. "Do you think we'll be okay without Belle?" Sophie asked softly, voice wavering. Catherine smiled, sweeping a strand of hair from Sophie's face. "Oh, darling, we have Belle's spirit in every corner of this place. She lives in Storm's steady stride, in our community's kindness, in your courage. We'll be more than okay. We'll thrive." Sophie leaned against her mother. "I think so too," she said, voice firm. Beneath the first stars of a clear night, the oak silhouette stood guard, and the rowan sapling swayed gently in the breeze. The sanctuary pulsed with life, equine residents dozing contentedly in their stalls, volunteers tidying tack, distant laughter from the manor house. In that quiet moment, Catherine reflected on the metamorphosis they had achieved, from desperation to hope, from isolation to community, from loss to legacy. Belle's farewell had drawn a line beneath a chapter of their lives, but beyond it lay a new story, one of healing, growth, and unwavering resolve. And as the wind whispered through the paddock, Catherine knew Belle's lessons would guide them always, a living testament to the power of love's enduring ripple. 1 year later, Ashworth Manor stood transformed. The once crumbling estate now hummed with life and purpose, its stone walls warmed by climbing roses and ivy, and the paddocks alive with horses of every size and color. On a bright Sunday afternoon, Catherine Ashworth stepped onto the wide porch, watching dozens of children weave among grazing ponies and therapy horses. Laughter drifted on the breeze, mingling with the soft rhythm of hooves on grass and the distant clip-clop of riders on the bridle path. Sophie, now 13, guided a small group of visitors, children in wheelchairs, crutches, and walking frames, along the pathway lined with lavender and rosemary. She spoke with confidence and warmth, explaining the sanctuary's origins and the horses' stories. Storm, resplendent and steady, ambled beside her. Children reached out to stroke his coat, their faces bright with wonder. Behind them, Belle's sapling, planted where she had been laid to rest, grew tall and strong, its fiery rowan berries nodding in the spring breeze. Catherine inhaled the sweet, earthy perfume of the grounds and felt a deep swell of pride. This was more than a sanctuary. It was a living testament to resilience, compassion, and community. She remembered the debt notices, the broken fences, the threats from Marcus Whitmore, and now those worries felt like shadows in a distant dream. Walking down the stone steps, Catherine joined Sophie and the children. A small band of volunteers carried picnic baskets and blankets, preparing the traditional afternoon tea party at the heart of the meadow. Tables dressed in crisp white linens stood beneath a blossoming apple tree, laden with scones, finger sandwiches, and steaming pots of Earl Grey. The local Women's Institute had outdone themselves. Vases of wildflowers dotted every table, and the air glowed with floral fragrance. As the children settled on the blankets, Catherine opened her arms to address the gathering, her voice calm and steady. "Welcome, everyone," she began. "It's hard to believe how far we've come since that rainy day at the horse fair. Back then, I had no idea if we'd make it through the year, let alone build something that brings joy and healing to so many." She paused, smiling at Sophie, leading a shy child to pet a gentle pony named Daisy. "This is what I call the British way of resilience," Catherine continued. "When we face hardships, we don't simply complain or wait for help, we act. We roll up our sleeves, we unite, and we create solutions. That's how we rebuilt this sanctuary." Children giggled as Storm nickered, nudging Sophie's hand. Parents and volunteers nodded in agreement. "And true wealth," she said, voice warm, "isn't measured by titles or land. It's measured by what we give away: time, care, love." Belle taught us that real richness comes from compassion, and Storm reminded us that every creature deserves a chance to heal. She glanced at the rowan sapling and the tranquil paddocks beyond.
Finally, about legacy and continuity, every great effort begins with a single choice. A choice to believe, to help, to take that first step, even when the odds are against you. Today, Ashworth Manor isn't just my home, it's a foundation for future generations. Because when we choose kindness, it ripples outward, becoming something far greater than ourselves. Catherine sat as the children scampered forward to claim their tea and treat. Sophie joined her on the bench, tray of scones in hand. They ate together, side by side, watching the scenes unfold. "Mom, look at them," Sophie whispered between bites. "They're so happy." Catherine nodded, brushing a crumb from Sophie's lap. "Yes, darling, this was all worth it." In the distance, a small film crew from a regional news station arrived to cover the sanctuary's anniversary. They set up cameras, interviewing volunteers, and capturing footage of therapy sessions, educational workshops, and fundraising events. Catherine agreed to a brief interview, sharing the story of how one family's determination and one wild horse named Storm had sparked a movement of hope. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shafts across the fields, Catherine and Sophie strolled along the edge of the paddock. Storm joined them, tossing his mane, and new foals pranced nearby, symbols of fresh beginnings. "Do you think we'll ever tire of this, Mom?" Sophie asked, leaning close. Catherine laughed, heart light. "I don't think so. This place and these horses keep giving back to us in ways I never imagined." They paused beneath the ancient oak by the manor gate, where a bronze plaque now read, "Ashworth Manor Horse Sanctuary, founded 2024. Healing hearts, changing lives." "It all started with a single yes," Catherine murmured, voice soft. "When you answer kindness's call, you never know how far the ripples will spread. Sometimes the smallest choice changes everything, not just for one life, but for an entire community." Sophie smiled up at her mother, eyes shining. "I'm glad you said yes," she replied. They stood together as dusk settled, the sky painted in pinks and purples. A cooling breeze whispered through the fields, carrying the distant laughter of children and the contented nickers of horses. In that perfect moment, Catherine and Sophie felt the full measure of their journey. The darkness of struggle, the brilliance of community, and the enduring power of hope. Ashworth Manor stood as a beacon of light for all who needed healing, a reminder that resilience, love, and unwavering conviction could transform any broken landscape into a place of sanctuary and joy. And so their story continued, carried forward by every hoofbeat on the earth they had saved together.